Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the City Winery here in New York City. Coming home to his world tour and homecoming performance is Queens' own Najee. And in a career spanning some 4 decades, Najee has been on the front lines, not only playing the flout, but also alto saxophone, tenor saxophone, and soprano saxophone. Now, this gentleman has been an accomplished soloist, but also has recorded and tours with the likes of Prince, as well as George Duke, Sheila E, just to name the many in his few. Tonight he is performing music from his new album, Under the Moon and Over the Sky, which is homage to the great Angela Bofill. And on this album features some very special guest appearances and performances from the great Regina Belle to the legendary Will Downing. Tonight here on the Pace Report, you're going to see his homecoming concert, performing music and selections of his current record as well as his hits, as well as we had a chance to sit down and break bread and talk about him growing up in Queens and how he was taught and mentored by the great Jimmy Heath as well as Frank Foster. Also, we sit down and we reflect on some of his heroes as well as what drove him to playing the flute as well as saxophone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of Queen's own Najee performing here at the City Winery, performing music from his brand new record, Under the Moon and Over the Sky, here at the City Winery, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. very special in the sense that you pay homage to the great Angela Bofill in the title song.
Yes.
And you have a special Regina Belle on here singing.
Absolutely.
How did this come about?
Well, you know, it was during COVID I started this record, and at the time I was also going down to Brazil to record a record called Bossa Nova Nueces, which is a group down there, headed by Robert Ayers. He was like he's a producer that, you know, goes to Brazil, he loves Brazilian culture a little bit. Anyway, so I started to do the record, and I decided I was going to go independent, as opposed to being with a label, you know. And I don't know, man, for whatever reasons, I didn't want to do just a totally instrumental record. I wanted to work with some of my friends, especially when I was thinking about the title song and the song La Costa, where Natalie Cole wrote that song. So, and it just developed into what it is, you know. It was no real plan, really, you know, it was just how things turned out.
I had the honor of interviewing Miss Bofill, and as a little kid, again, my dad's friend, Mr. Johnson, I remember that album, Angel of the Night, and the beauty.
Yes.
And then her first record, it's just a facial of her.
Right.
And it was her foray into the music world.
Right.
And when you hear the original song, you're like, okay, you got the Dave Grusin arrangements, but you kind of re-envisioned it and brought it into modern times. How hard and how easy was that?
You know what, my experience as an artist goes way back. I mean, growing up here in New York City, I had the pleasure of studying at Jazzmobile in Harlem with the late Jimmy Heath, you know, under the Dr. Billy Taylor. You know, so I've been fortunate to play different genres of music all of my musical life. Played in the R&B bands in New York, you know, and some of the Latin bands, and then and straight ahead jazz. And then when I decided to go to a conservatory up in Boston, New England Conservatory of Music, I got more big band experience. So, you know, I'm like all over the place. You know, I've gone from working with Charles Earland to, you know, Larry Carlton and Billy Cobham, Herbie, and then I'm on tour with Prince, you know, or Chaka, you know. So it's kind of like all over the place. You know?
This album is very interesting too. You got Will Downing on here.
Yes.
He's doing Catching the Fall, Feeling, Catching the Feeling, and you have Mr. Roberson.
Yes, right? I do.
You, this is really a different departure from what you normally do.
Mm-hmm.
How's the reception? Because you're on world tour right now. How's everybody responded to
It's
the
been
music?
very good. You know, we didn't play the single today, but which featured Brian Simpson, a smooth jazz keyboardist. But it's been very good because if anybody has the streaming the record, they get a sense of what it is, you know, and it's been very good, honestly.
Najee, you've been part of the whole record machine ever since you started. How has the independent route gone? Because a lot of musicians now have had to go the independent route because the majors really not what the majors used to be.
Exactly.
How has it been for you in this transition part of your career?
Well, it's new for me. You know, I started with two young artists before I put this record out. One is named Ellis Hamilton, the other one is Riley Richard. They're both saxophone players. And so we put out their singles, and they did very well at radio. So I said, okay, we're ready. And then what we found with the labels is that, yeah, it's great to do things with labels if you're able to do that. But a lot of times you end up doing a lot of the work anyway. So it came to me, well, okay, we're doing a lot of the work, and they're taking half the money. You know, it's like, I mean, we know what to do, you know. So,
right.
Yeah, so it made sense, and you know, the game has changed so much. It's not a retailer driven game anymore. Now Billboard represents, okay, you're getting some spins. Before, Billboard represented, you know, how many units you were actually selling.
Right.
And I remember being depressed one time because we went from like 13,000 units a week to 5,000. I was like, oh man, my career's over, because I didn't know.
Right.
You know, so, you know, things are very different now. You know, so anybody who really wants to be independent, it really is a good challenge and a good thing. You know, you learn a lot.
You know, I've been honored to break bread with a lot of musicians over the years. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of changes in the music industry. And one of the things that I disliked about this term called smooth jazz was that the programmers took your artistry and softened it up.
Right, yeah.
And I want your take on this because, you know, when I was living in Detroit, it was smooth jazz,
Yeah.
VMV, and I was like, wait a minute, now Najee being mixed with Carly Simon, I'm having a hard time digesting this pill.
Right. Yeah.
What is your take on that now that smooth jazz is gone, that format is gone,
Pretty much, yeah.
but you're still doing what you're doing?
Well, for me, my first few albums were really not jazz. They were R&B records with the saxophone lead.
Right.
And they were associations, so they called it jazz, But me, I'm a jazz musician. I know when I'm playing jazz and when I'm not. But, I think I established an audience very early on that grew with me. I was fortunate to grab an audience of people who were coming out of college, getting their first credit cards and building lives and families and things, and that whole audience grew with me. The biggest thing I hear all the time is people say, you were my first introduction to jazz, and then later on it became smooth jazz when corporate world got involved, and it lasted as long as they were able to sell advertising time, but when that didn't happen, then it killed the format.
That's right.
So. Mm-hmm.
I mean, Najee, you grew up Queens.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you had a wonderful radio station, WRVR.
That's right, we had WRVR.
That wasn't smooth jazz.
That's right.
It wasn't, and in Detroit there was WJZZ.
Yep.
And it wasn't. Did you have a hard time with that terminology? Say that because that came into fruition like in the mid-90s.
Yes, it did. And actually, originally it was called contemporary jazz. Right. And then there was a lady, she's passed on, Denise, I can't think of her last name. She was out of Chicago, a sister who came up with the term smooth jazz and who coined it, and they ran with it. She never really got the credit for that, for coming up with that term.
Little Anthony, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, told me something. He detests the term doo-wop.
Okay.
He says it's American street corner music. This is Black American music.
Right. Yeah.
How do you interpret that in a new generation that's really not exposed to the music that you and I grew up listening to?
When you say interpret, like what do you mean?
Playing it for the fans, and then people who never heard it, just like, oh, this is great, or they take away from what they come from with something they've never been exposed to.
Right. Well, I think for me, it's always a pleasure to see the music shared and do that. If I had to name anything that bothers me, it's when people don't give the credit due. I've heard some of our jazz contemporaries, smooth jazz contemporaries, not give respect to somebody like a Grover Washington Jr., who changed the culture of jazz. As we knew it back in the 70s. Him, George Benson, many. There was several. Joe Sample with the Crusaders.
Yes.
I mean, there was several. Ronnie Laws. These guys, before that, we were, we had bebop, and it went into what they called free jazz with, McCoy and John Coltrane and all that, which was structured in and of itself. But then, Grover and those people, I mean, you actually danced to that. Herbie Hancock with Headhunters, all that stuff kind of laid the bedwork for where we are today, in terms of what we call contemporary jazz, which is really, just the music with a beat, That's pretty much it, so. sing what I play. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Come on.
hail from Queens.
Yes.
Omar Hakeem, Marcus Miller, Tom Brown, Bernard Wright.
Yeah.
I understand you went to high school with Russell Simmons.
I did, yes.
What is it about Queens? Because Queens and Brooklyn and even Manhattan, musicians have a different chip on their shoulder when they're representing their brand.
I know, right?
What is it about Queens? Because Queens, I'm telling you, and also a lot of people don't know this, Count Basie, James Brown,
that's right,
all of the black football and basketball players,
that's right,
lived in Queens.
That's right, in Addersley Park mainly. Which when I bought my first house, that's where I bought it, in Addersley Park. And I'll tell you a funny story, when I was about 13 years old, I used to walk through Addersley Park because my friend and I, we liked these girls that lived in there and we would follow them home. And one day, we passed by this house and we see this, there's a pool. They have an in-ground pool and a fence. And we had some cookies and we started throwing cookies at this lady in the pool. And next thing we know, we run across Merrick Boulevard and here comes this limousine with this big lady coming out of it in a bathing suit and a bat. I didn't know then that we were throwing cookies at Mrs. Count Basie. Oh, wow. True story.
Oh, wow.
And we used to trick or treat on Halloween. You know, James Brown had a house there, so on Halloween he would give records. Never saw him, but he would send somebody out with records for trick or treaters and stuff. So it was a great neighborhood. But I think to answer your question, one thing about Queens is it had houses, you know, and the educational system for music was strong in the public school. At least when I was coming up. And so you were supported. You started a little band, you know, you were rehearsing in somebody's basement or garage, you know, back then. So there was a natural place to grow, you know, musically. And we competed with each other, you know, we learned from each other. I remember Marcus Miller, and I was in a band once where Marcus Miller would sit in the rehearsal, and he reminded me of this. He would sit there and watch our bass player. I didn't know who he was, you know, he was just this quiet kid. And so, that was the kind of environment we had, Yeah.
You know, George Cables is from Queens.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah.
I love George Cables.
Yeah. George still lives in Queens.
Really?
Yes, he does.
I had no idea.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
still living and
That's
ticking.
Yeah.
I'll hook you up.
Okay, now that I would love.
I'm gonna hook you up. I'll definitely hook you up. Jazzmobile.
Mm-hmm.
I'm following on the back end of the coattails of Dr. Billy Taylor.
Yeah.
Dr. Billy Taylor used to host Sunday mornings on CBS.
Oh, okay. Really?
And he used to interview all the jazz icons.
Okay.
Yeah, he's an award-winning journalist
I didn't
too.
know that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
you have a chance, go online, YouTube, and look at his interviews.
I will.
And Billy Taylor's program was very instrumental in New York musicians.
He was, yeah.
And he brought up something earlier in the interview. Jimmy Heath,
Yes.
Frank Foster were
Frank Foster,
two
yeah.
very important.
They were, yeah.
How were they?
They were great. I mean, they were, Jimmy, I got to study in his flute master class. He had a jazz flute master class. And, really it was jazz theory, but I played flute in the class. And Jerry Allen was there, the great keyboardist, pianist. She was there before she passed. But we were all kids there, and it was really great. Frank Foster, what can I say, man? I mean, he was a legend. They were tough on us, because we were kids and we weren't very disciplined, but they gave us all the jewels we needed to be what we are today. So.
Did you expect any less? I mean,
no,
these guys were
they were legends.
Not only legends, but the time that they had to play was at a time when black men,
right,
the doors were not open to us.
That's right.
And he handed down some gems.
He did. And I remember when he came to my school, August Martin High School, and he performed with Frank West, him, and I don't remember who was. It was him on piano, and I remember who was on drums and bass. But he invited the students who were musically inclined in the school to join Jazzmobile. So Dr. Billy Taylor, we remember him with a lot of love.
Yes, and I did some digging. I mean, New England Conservatory.
Mm-hmm.
You got Jaki Byard, who lived in Queens. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
And then George Russell. Now, I know a lot about this music and history, and I'm still learning. But George had this theory that is known throughout the music world. You want to explain what that is?
It was called the Lydian chromatic concept. And a friend of mine from Queens, also saxophone player, Ed Jackson, played in his band, the George Russell big band. And he had to leave to go to Europe with some saxophone quartet. He asked me to take his place in the band. And George was very hard to be, the music was incredible. But, it was also dark, in the sense that you could tell he was a guy, in hindsight, he was a guy that was really frustrated with things, how the music world didn't really embrace what he was doing, but a true genius, so.
What were his lessons like? What was it like sitting with him?
Well, it was great, I mean, in the sense that you learned a lot, but he wasn't very inviting, he wasn't an inviting guy, you didn't get no warm. So Jaki Byard was a little different, I got to study with him personally, with jazz theory and stuff. And Jaki was a lot of fun, and then I ended up playing in his band, the Apollo Stompers, too, the Boston band, The big band music was wonderful, and then when Jaki left, George took over, and, but George had a whole different approach, it was just kind of, but the music was incredible, very challenging and just incredible to play,
I had the honor, God rest his soul, I had dinner with the legendary Benny King.
Wow, okay.
In Harlem, too.
Okay.
At one of my friend's restaurant he used to own in East Harlem.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And God, if Mr. Fair, there's one of my dad's best friends, his homies from Detroit. When I was a kid, I used to sit down and listen to those Drifters and Benny King records.
Right.
And you had the honor of touring,
I did,
playing with him. Tell me about Mr. King.
Well, how that all came about, I'm not really sure. There was a friend of mine, Reggie Woods, who's a great tenor saxophone player, but some kind of way made the connection. He needed a horn section, And I had just come off the road with a group called Area Code that was from Queens. And because I quit the band because I decided I was going to go to college, and which was Bronx Community College in the music department. And for that summer, some kind of way I got hooked up where they wanted me to join the band, and I did. He was a great guy to work with, though. He was very kind, very kind.
Yeah,
very easy to be around.
Yeah, he told some amazing stories.
Yeah.
And then you had the opportunity to just go on the road with Chaka Khan.
Yes.
And Chaka was to your generation as what Aretha was the generation before. She brought on a very different trajectory in R&B.
She did.
What was it like working with her?
It was great. I mean, she was, she was a tough girl, tough lady.
Chicago.
Yeah. And, for us, my brother Fareed, he played guitar in the band alongside Tony Maiden from Rufus.
Wow.
And there's a woman named Lizette Wilson, who was from Queens, piano player. She was the musical director. And I just left Boston because I couldn't afford to go to the conservatory anymore. So I left Boston, came back to New York, and I was actually in a club playing traditional straight ahead music. And she was there, and she called me up. She said, listen, Chaka wants to hire a horn section, but she wants to hire all white guys for the horn section. I was like, okay. She said, but if you audition, if you can play the charts, I could probably get you on the gig. And that's what happened. Of course, I wasn't going to miss that opportunity.
Right.
And she hired us, and we went on the road with her on the Ain't Nobody tour. That was a lot of fun,
What did you learn from her? And what did she bring to your musicianship? Credibility, because when we joined the band, we were young, and she had just done a live album which featured Michael Brecker, David Sanborn, Ernie Wilkins, big names. And here we are, these kids out of New York, needing a gig, and she gave it to us, man. So she brought credibility, because once you worked with her, my world opened up. I met Melissa Morgan, who was a R&B singer that was in the band. She signed her first deal with Capitol through Charles Huggins, Hush Productions. I played on her record, and then Charles comes to me, he says, hey, listen, I'm thinking about signing a jazz artist. He thought I was a keyboard player. He said, man, I didn't know you played sax like that. I was like, yeah, I'm a sax player, kind of thing. And that's how I got signed. I got signed through Hush Productions, and got signed to EMI, whole Capitol system, and the rest is history. Yeah, I mean, those first 3 records.
Yeah.
I mean, you were everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
Bet You Don't Know, Sweet Love.
Yeah.
That first record, I think for that whole year, you was in like top 5.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You was everywhere, man.
Yeah, I was very lucky, man. I mean, I didn't have a clue as to what I was doing, to be honest with you. I was just a saxophone player from New York with a funny name back then, I mean, but, one of the brilliant things that Hush Productions did, because they were great at marketing, was they put me on the tour with Freddie Jackson. And Freddie Jackson was doing big arenas back then, And I mean, I'd go out there do 15 minutes, but I was also able to connect with R&B radio. Back then R&B radio would play the music I did, either, here and there, and then at night on the Quiet Storm formats, I got a lot of that. And that tour really opened up my whole solo world,
sitting on Donnie Simpson's television.
Right,
show.
right.
You know, and I'm showing my age right now.
Right.
You know, Donnie Simpson is an institution.
True.
You know, he was really like Ed Sullivan in the R&B world. Everybody went to DC and went to BET and did that show.
Yes, that's true.
How were you with the video thing? Because a lot of the old school icons, they detested doing the music videos during the 80s.
Well, you know, I took a lot of criticism in the beginning, but I learned to ignore it because I realized that a lot of times people were either jealous of not being able to have achieved that kind of success, or you know, they were afraid of the cultural change, you know. And listen, you know, every era, you know, when the culture changes, so does the music, you know. So, and me, I mean, I'm a jazz musician. I played in real jazz bands, you know. So for me, I never was insecure about who I really was. You know, I just saw an opportunity to do something different, and it didn't feel unnatural to me, you know. Basically, I just went to get a check, you know.
Hey, there's nothing wrong
most
with
of the guys I knew were broke and bitter, man. I didn't want that, you know.
Right.
So.
I have to talk about this because this is another important part of your career. Again, I'm showing my age. Prince.
Yes.
Was one of my musical heroes.
Oh man, yeah.
And you were on that Rainbow album.
Yes. Rainbow.
You were on the Rainbow, and you were on the other album with
Live. Yeah.
Yes.
Live. Yeah. Live.
How did you two get together, and what was that experience?
Oh my God, it ended up being a great experience. You know, Prince, how it all started was he would come to my shows. I was playing in LA at the Greek Theater. I think it was a Greek Theater, and it was at that point I was actually opening shows for Chaka. And then he would come to my shows and check me out, but I didn't know it. I'd be on stage and they'd be, man, did you see Prince? He was checking you out. I'm like, no, where is he? You know, he disappeared. A couple of years later, some kind of way I was invited through his attorney to come to Madison Square Garden and see his show. So I went, sitting next to Maxwell, and he invited us to come to the after party and bring, you know, jam with him. So I had my flute and I went, jammed, you know, we had a nice time. That was my first time meeting him. And then maybe about a month later, I get a call from Dougie Fresh, you know, and he says, yo, the artist is looking for you. I was like, what do you mean looking for me? He's like, yo, he heard you play that flute. It was dope, man. He was like, how can I get in touch with him? So I said, have him call me. So tell you a quick story. I'm at home in LA, and all of a sudden I get this call, and this guy goes, Najee, the artist would like to speak with you. I'm like, okay, he's gonna call you back. Click. I'm like, that was weird. Same guy calls back, he goes, Najee, I have the artist on the line. Prince gets on the phone and he goes, yo man, what's up? I'm like, I don't know what's up. He's like, when are you and I getting together? I was like, this is really weird, right? And so I said, I don't know, when are we getting together? He says, well, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm at home. He says, why don't you come out to Minneapolis? I said, when do you want me to go? He said, come out right now. I'm like, I can't come right now. He said, when can you come out? I said, maybe, well, next week is a good time. He's like, okay, have somebody call you. Click, just like that. Weird. And then, so anyway, we booked a ticket. The agent calls. We booked a ticket with my brother and I. He flies us first class the whole day. We go out to Paisley Park. And it started out as just jam sessions. You know, at 2 a.m. he called and said, send a car, and we go and we just jam. And then finally he comes to me and he says, listen man, I got this record I want you to do with me, and it was a Rainbow Children record, you know. And I did that, and he said, man, I'd like you to join the MPG for a 2-week tour. Well, it ended up being 3 years by the time it was said and done, you know. But it was probably one of the greatest experiences, honestly.
One of my favorite saxophonists is Eric Leeds.
Oh, okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
Did you interact with Eric?
Yeah, not consistently, but he would come, you know, Prince would have some of the people come in and out. Like Maceo was there a lot, you know, me and Maceo or Candy Dolphin. But yeah, Eric was there for a few things, you know, so.
Eric was coming from the Pharoah Sanders / Coltrane /
yeah.
John Clemmer thing.
Right.
He was really coming from the John Clemmer thing, early part.
Sure.
How he started is not how he finished.
Right.
But Prince's intensity,
yes.
Was there a high demand, or did it just kind of organically come?
It was a little bit of both. You know, it was high demand because when we rehearsed, you know, it had to be exact. Everything had to be exact. And even on the Rainbow Children album, he directed me on what he wanted to hear, because he already had it composed in his head, what he wanted to hear. And he understood my voice as a saxophone and flute player. And so he would sing parts, and then he would give me parts where he would let me just go do other things. But, you know, it was intense, you know, at times. So, but he also was one of the most generous musicians I ever met on the stage. You know, he gave me a lot of room to play. And, you know.
What's the one thing or the couple of things that you learned from those 3 years with Prince?
Well, there were a lot of things. I mean, one thing we never did is we never talked money. You know, we never did that. One day he comes to me, I'm in the kitchen making some tea. He says, "Hey man, I got to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay, all right." He says, "I got a little problem." I said, "What do you mean, what problem?" I thought it was music. He said, "I don't know what to pay you." I'm like, "I don't know what to charge you." You know? And after that, we never talked money, because he was in this thing never doing contracts. You know, I'd just come home and there'd be this checks, man. You know, so it was things like that. But you know, I mean, he was one of the most generous and smartest people I ever met in my life, man, honestly. You know, talked a lot with him. And a lot of times in the studio, he would be directing you know, wouldn't be an engineer, it'd just be me and him, you know. And then when it came time for the shows, if he wanted parts, I would write out the parts, because they would be so intense, man, you know, some of his stuff. So, you know, it was a great experience, it really was.
This is the vinyl imprint part of the interview. And you grew up in an era where, and I grew up in an era where you would go to a record store, browse, pick, take them home. And you go home and you listen.
Right.
I want you to pull the first record out on top.
On top?
Yes.
Yep. I know this very well.
Show the dudes what this is.
Charlie Parker with strings.
Tell me why that's an important part.
Because this is where Charlie Parker was doing pop music of the day. So there were popular tunes. Let me see. Some of the songs that were very famous back then. April in Paris, Summertime, If I Should Lose You. You know, these were the hits. If we wanted to call it the contemporary music of the time, you know, this is where he stepped away from the traditional. He was still Bird, but this is a classic here, y'all.
Why is it important to you?
Well, you know, it showed another side, and also, you know, when people get into that whole critical thing about you playing commercial music, well, Bird did it.
Yeah.
Herbie did it.
Yeah.
Miles did it. You know, so
Sinatra did it.
Sinatra did it.
Yeah.
You know, so there you go. This is living proof of you know, someone who we respect dearly and love dearly, and doing pop music of the time.
Pull out the second record.
Yes, sir.
Sit the next record.
Oh man, this is dope. This here, a treasure.
Talk to me.
This is John Coltrane, Love Supreme. And I really believe during that time, you know, John Coltrane was going through what I would call a spiritual metamorphosis, you know, because when you listen to this record, you can tell that he was evolving, but beyond his consciousness as a musician had grown to another place, you know, spiritually, in my opinion. And it took me, honestly, it took me years to understand this record. You know, when I first heard it, I didn't get it because I was a, you know, Giant Steps guy, you know, Countdown, you know, I was all impressed with the technical stuff. But here, this is just a man reaching, you know, I mean, a man's, you know, evolving to the point where, you know, he was just doing stuff, you know, experimenting.
Train said that when he did this record, and even the record before that, he said that all the music that he was going to play, he was going to play for God. It was all going to be spiritual. So I think you were right. He was metamorphosing into something else. So why is Train so important to you as a musician?
Well, you know, he represented breaking the mold, if you will. I mean, each music, when you think of Charlie Parker, he broke the mold in one way, you know, because that, as a musician, that's where after, you know, you had people like Louis Armstrong and things like that, they pretty much stuck to the feeling in the traditional chords, you know. But when Bird came along, all of a sudden we had, you know, we had the ninths, the sevenths, the raised 11s, the flat 13s, you know, and all the alternate scales and chords, you know, in melodic contents of the songs, you know. And with John Coltrane, he did the same thing, but it was a different era, and it was a different approach to, you know, when you look at Giant Steps and how it's mathematically adds up, you know, so.
Pull out the next two records.
Okay, two.
Yeah.
Okay.
And pull out the next one.
Oh, wow.
Pull out the next one.
Yes, sir. Oh, man.
Now, it would be sacrilegious for flautists
Yes.
not to talk about.
Hubert Laws?
There you go. Talk to me.
Well, Hubert Laws was my favorite flute player when I was a kid. I wanted to be him, you know? And I told him that when I spoke to him on the phone once. I told him, listen, man, I always wanted to be you. And I think my style as a jazz flautist is really based on his, you know, because to me he was like the perfect flute player. Not only that, Hubert is one of the few people who's respected not only in jazz but in classical.
That's right.
He can walk in both worlds and be respected. That's not easy to do, you know. I mean, Witten is able to do that as well, and Brampton Marsalis, he's able to do it.
And another thing, he was kindred spirits with Chick Corea.
Right.
He loved classical music.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's funny because those early recordings of Hubert and him playing on those records, or him playing on Chick's records, you're like, oh, we hear this classical influence. Yeah. What's important about his style?
What is about his style is he was probably the one who crossed over with the flute. I mean, we had Herbie Mann, you know, who was great. But he was that guy that could go through all the changes the way he did, fluidly, and still stuff in the classical world. You know, and he had soul. If you understand what I mean by that. You know?
And I think Hubert got that soul. Here's another guy that is criminally underrated, James Moody.
Oh yes, that's right. That's right.
I think James.
Yeah. Oh my God, he was crazy.
He was crazy. James Moody and Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
That's right.
Those two took the flute and put it in a very different trajectory.
Right.
And I'll tell you another flautist who was also heavily influenced by Hubert was Bobby Humphrey.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, she studied with him. You know?
Yeah.
The closest I got to being Hubert studying was with Harold Jones. I studied with Harold Jones at Manhattan School of Music when I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to. They went to college together at Juilliard.
Okay.
But Harold took the classical route. He ended up being the first flautist of the first African American flautist of the Brooklyn Philharmonic Orchestra.
Wow.
And he was a tough guy. Oh my God, he was rough on me. Till this day, I still study the stuff that he gave me. You know, so.
All right. Take out the next two records.
Okay.
Now you're gonna flip when you see these.
Wow. Oh yeah, I remember these records. I remember Herbie Mann.
Talk to me.
Herbie Mann was, you know, like for me, Herbie Mann, when it came to Hubert, Hubert was like the next level for me. You know, Herbie Mann, we used to play his music in our little R&B band we had, you know. There was a song called, back in the 70s, called Hijack.
Woo!
You remember that? Is that on here?
No. That's on one, that's the disco record.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so, and you know, he also spent time in Brazil. I remember 2 years ago when I was down in Rio de Janeiro, I went into the Blue Note there in Rio de Janeiro. They had, not the Blue Note, the original club where he and Antonio Carlos Jobim, they used to play. Little place, it might be slightly bigger than this, you know. And his name was written on the wall and everything, you know. So he spent a lot of time down there,
Yeah.
in Brazil.
And you know another thing about Herbie Mann, and this is when Atlantic Records in the 60s was producing some very unorthodox and funky records.
Right.
Herbie did the whole scope. He did Middle Eastern.
That's right.
He did Latin.
Yeah.
He did funk. He did disco.
Yeah.
That era of music is never ever gonna happen again.
No, not at all. Man, you got some real treasures here.
All right,
You know that, right?
Give me the last one. Last two.
Okay.
Pull those last two records.
Yes, sir. Oh wow, man, you got David Newman. Yes, sir. You know, he was one of the unsung heroes. You know, honestly.
Thank you for
underrated, never really getting the attention that on the level of, you know, because he was surrounded at the time he came out. You know, the big names were Train, you know, Pharaoh, you know, and all that. But this is great, man.
Tell me about David Newman, because he was like you. He was a master flautist, and a tenor saxophone, and a soprano saxophone.
Right. Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Again, you know, he was. I think he was underrated, honestly. You know, but he could do it all. You know, he could do it all, and and he had great people as we see Warriors in there. And he had the contemporary thing going on for that time, if you remember. Yeah.
What was the first jazz concert Najee went to see?
What do you think? You know, when I was a kid, there was here in New York City on West 55th Street, there used to be called the Jazz Museum. And on Sundays, they would always have prominent jazz artists. Like the first time I saw Hank Mobley was in there. And, but on Sundays, you know, as a kid, all you had to do was give a little donation, but I was a kid, so I didn't have any money. But I would just take the train in from Queens, get off here in Midtown Manhattan, and you know, go inside. It was like a room. It wasn't the town hall was right next door to it, what he had. But Sundays they would always have like really professional. Ronnie Cuba, I saw him in there. The great baritone saxophonist. Who else I saw there? Quite a few people, man. I mean, Hank Jones, you know, saw him in there. They had a lot of people that would come, you know, and it was. I think most of the musicians donated their time, you know. So.
Najee, what does Black American music mean?
That's a deep one, man, because that goes so deep into where it originated. I saw this interview with Santana once, and I love Santana, but he said, all of this stuff is from Africa. I come from, on my mother's side, I come from a family who are West Indian. And their roots go deep into, when you listen to West Indian music, and if you go to Africa, you hear Africa in the music, Even in Latin, salsa, those rhythms, all that is African, translated. When the slaves came to the Americas, they brought that with them, and the people who incorporated it into the thing and it became what it is. But, I think that belongs to Africa, honestly, And it's evolved, and it's combined with the Western culture, which, now we use the Western system of music, combined with that, Yeah. So it's part of the American DNA, it needs to be told, so.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the City Winery here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank the incomparable Najee for his time. Make sure you support his brand new CD, Under the Moon and Over the Sky, which is now available on Amazon as well as all streaming platforms. For more information on his upcoming spring and summer dates, please visit him on social media by way of Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'd like to personally thank the staff and management here at the City Winery for their warm hospitality, as well as Ms. Claire McClare for Claire McClare Public Relations for arranging my time with Najee. As always, people, I can't stress this more than enough. Please like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on YouTube, and leave comments, and follow me on social media. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.